and we are back for round 3. This is CBR MTG's, well, actually it's Josh and Pat's MTG Bazaar hosting us today for CanBrawl 2. That's right, we are coming back again to our Australian national capital in Canberra at Jolt Games in Mitchell. Thank you so much, Jolt, for hosting us. Thank you so much, Josh and Pat's MTG Bazaar, for sponsoring this wonderful event. Lots of prizes, lots of things happening, lots of fun.
Yeah, and we've had a great turnout today with 63 players. It's really, really good to see people supporting this sort of national kind of pet format in the capital.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get a benefit as well. You astute listeners who could hear before the round started, we have Will on the left playing mono white, and Dillon on the right playing Yorionimator. We're still pending on the name, but this is the CBR MTG GRV challenge. I've tried to make the most ludicrous, most hard, most complex Reanimator deck I could possibly make, and this is the result. So Yorion is the companion, 80 whole cards ready to look at, and we should see a lot of fun today from both players.
Yeah, Yorion definitely a card that has sort of made a little bit more splash in Magic the Gathering than some people first anticipated. I think when the companions kind of first came out, everyone was very hyped on Lutri and Luris especially, but Yorion has kind of seen play in quite a few formats, not just in Highlander, but also in things like Modern, where the consistency that you lose from the extra cards in your deck just doesn't matter as much as the fact that you get to put Yorion into your hand.
Yeah,
for 3 mana.
It's usually been seen, you're not usually playing Yorion in a combo deck because obviously you have less chance of finding your particular combo cards. But what I've done for this deck is played like a mid-range version of Reanimator, where yes, you can reanimate stuff very quickly. There's still Entomb, there's still Reanimate, but we're also playing initiative creatures. We're playing our own copy of Fourth Theralingus. We're playing the White Plume Adventurer. So we still have lots of like distract you with this mid-rangey threat and also threaten a Gristlebrand on turn 2.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can make for an interesting sort of sideboarding and play decisions when your opponent's deck can attack from so many different angles. It can make it a little bit awkward as the pilot sometimes when the pieces don't come together properly, but when they do, it can be really, really fun to pilot and really difficult for your opponent to sort of answer all of these threats coming from sort of a fair mid-range angle as well as that sort of unfair Entomb Reanimate angle that you can present as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Will, I mean, I'm so excited to see Dillon on camera. I hope they do really well. But Will deserves a mention of his own because he was the previous winner of CanBrawl. So CanBrawl 1 hosted a few months ago, and with a very similar deck, Mono White Prison. So we see a border post here, a good way to make your balance better, a good way to make your land tax better, just bouncing a basic land back to your hand, and it coming into play tapped. I think actually just pay 1. There's some sort of bouncing involved. But anyway, it's a land that is not quite a land.
Yeah, definitely any sort of artifact mana is going to be really powerful with those sort of balance effects and some of those other kind of things that white can play, where just you say you want the board state to be fair, but you don't think fairness applies to artifacts.
Yeah, exactly.
So it can be a little bit silly.
Yeah, and we'll see how each deck goes. But we're seeing a Sapphire Triome on Dillon's side, just making that mana base a little bit more manageable, and a Giver of Runes actually coming in by the looks of it on Will's side, just getting in that damage and getting started on that attack. See here, the power of Triomes is that Dillon's on 5 colors now, so any Leyline Binding or any other domain cards that we see will be powered up by the fact that Dillon has all 5 colors. And this Bitter Reunion doing a great Faithless Looting impression, 2 mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. And the card that Dillon has elected to choose in this case is Grizzlebrand, a big one. That's for sure.
I mean, the Giver of Runes cracked in earlier. Unlike Mother of Runes, its sort of namesake cannot give itself protection.
Yeah.
So sort of in this kind of board state, it may as well crack in. But sort of those 1-life chips maybe aren't as threatening when Dillon on our right-hand side here. They're threatening to potentially unleash a Grizzlebrand at any given moment. I mean, people don't put Grizzlebrand in their graveyard because they think it looks pretty. Usually they have some kind of way of then animate deading or reanimating in their deck that they are threatening going forward.
Yeah, and we'll see if something like that happens. A quick shout out in the chat. Porrick, good to see you. Welcome to the stream. Sorry about the end of the cliffhanger at the end of last round, of course. If we change to the Be Right Back screen, it turns off the microphones, and I forgot about that. So yes, I was just saying something along the lines of everything is great, wonderful, see you for round 3, and now you're getting the replay of it. Interesting technology here. We're actually just, this is fantastic, and this is really showing Grief's worth. Really showing Grief's worth. Grief coming in, being evoked by a Dance of the Dead, and I think maybe Will might be pooping his pants right now to apologize for my crassness, but if you're exiling a Dance of the Dead to Grief, it might mean that you have a Necromancy in the wing, and now we do.
I mean, using that Grief to remove the answer to the Grizzlebrand, and obviously playing against this white style of deck, opting to kind of do it this way rather than an Animate Dead with sort of a Necromancy after a removal spell, because so many of white's removal does exile. Using Grief to just get rid of it. Will doesn't have a second answer to this Grizzlebrand, and if he doesn't find one soon, he's probably going to be finding himself on the play for a game 2, because Grizzlebrand is really, really good.
Oh yeah, really good. And we see the value of we see the value of Grizzlebrand right now, drawing Dillon 7 cards for the low cost of 7 life, one of them being a Chrome Mox pitching a Waker of Waves. And I think we've already made our 3rd land drop, if I'm not mistaken, so there'll be no more land drops, but we can go to hand size, and whoops, news just in from the battlefield. Never mind. Lion's Eye Diamond on Dillon's side. A cute interaction here, because you can Grizzlebrand draw 7 and discard your hand with Lion's Eye Diamond before, of course, the trigger resolves, so that you can draw those cards and still have that mana. So Lion's Eye Diamond requires a little bit of working around considering its downside, but yeah, and we're seeing the value here of Bitter Reunion giving Grizzlebrand haste as well. So this is a huge start for Dillon, and could be pretty bad for Will for sure.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Will feels pretty bitter about Grizzlebrand being reunited with his face. Don't think was really looking forward to that one.
No, definitely not. And it'd be scary enough seeing a Grizzlebrand on the battlefield without haste, but as soon as it comes cracking in, you're in a bad space. So Will's drawing a couple of cards here. I believe he Horizon Canopy to land away, but we are going to make a play here, and that play is Archon of Emeria by the looks of it. 3 mana 2/3 with flying, and it stops everyone from casting more than one spell a turn. So I think Will's saying, it's just a blocker, I'm sure it'll be fine. And if Dillon doesn't have a way to remove it, it will block and it will conserve the life total for Will, but Dillon's still going to gain that 7 life, maybe draw another 7 cards. It's going to be pretty difficult from here on out for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if all this Archon's going to do is chump block Grizzlebrand for a turn, that's definitely only a sort of a stopgap. I mean, sort of we're even at the point where even if Will does manage to rip something like Path to Exile off the top next turn, Dillon has pulled so far ahead in terms of raw material that trying to claw this game back from its current situation is pretty near impossible. Does have a pretty nice interaction here where he can give the Archon protection from black, but Dillon has an answer in his many cards, it seems.
Yeah, it's pretty actual last-minute addition. Leyline Binding, a flash O-ring that costs less if you have Domain. Really good in a 5-color deck, would you believe? So 1 mana coming in, exiling that Archon before blocks, and man, Will's going to have to take it to the face, and we'll see what Dillon's follow-up is.
I would imagine that blocks were already declared, so won't be able to crack any damage through and won't gain any life, but Dillon does manage to navigate that Archon off the board even through the Give River runes, which is pretty nice for their board state. And now with the Archon gone, can choose to deploy as many more cards from their hand as they see fit.
Yeah.
I guess it does sort of put a decent stopgap into the card advantage and life swings that Grizzlebrand represents. But I mean, Dillon's already managed to crack in once with the Grizzlebrand and draw so many cards that that's just so ahead on material.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty painful for Will to try and make his way back from this. We're seeing the discards now. Abdel and another card. So we are actually still getting value from our Faithless Looting. One of the very few cantrips in this deck. We see a token card as well. I've in this deck trying to just be a little bit cheeky because technically if your sleeves aren't completely opaque, you cannot play double-sided cards because of course you might be able to see the backside of it through the sleeve. So just to be extra careful, and I don't want to cause Dillon to have any unnecessary GRVs, just going to use a little placeholder flip card token there for that one. Not going to mean much because we're discarding the Brass's Tunnel Grinder, but it was enough to send Will screaming for home.
Yeah, has elected to not see any more cards in the deck Dillon is piloting and decided that they have sufficient information to move on to game 2. I think that game was definitely well and truly over, and any additional turns were really just to try to get more information for sideboarding choices.
Absolutely, yeah. Early Grizzlebrand does that. I think we have a lot of people who will first come up against Grizzlebrand in Yorionimator and they'll go, oh, maybe it'll be okay. Maybe I can like take 1 or 2 hits, but it's just like Atraxa, like sometimes Archon of Cruelty. If you don't have an answer immediately, you just cannot come back. So we'll see what happens with sideboarding here. Will's got a couple of cards. He's sort of thumbing to the front or just looking through. I think the Weathered Wayfarer is going to go away. We're keeping the Elite Spellbinder, which makes a lot of sense. Just I think Will's sort of goal is to disrupt. Anything that doesn't do that is probably not good enough, and Will's going to put it to the side and try and find some Containment Priests, trying to find some hate for the graveyard. Containment Priest particularly hard to deal with, but again, as we mentioned in that early part of the video, Dillon has like a pretty reasonable mid-range plan. So if Will overloads on sideboarding, he could find himself with 3 pieces or 2 pieces of graveyard hate in his hand and facing down a 4th Aerolingus or an Initiative, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the graveyard hate that white gets access to is arguably the best of any of the colors, with cards like Rest in Peace and Containment Priest. Rest in Peace just being incredibly impactful, and Containment Priest having that flash value as well as its additional text. And there's a whole bunch of other cards that white can throw in there as well. But obviously if Dillon just plays a slightly more fair game or plays intelligently around Graveyard Hate, can possibly manage to fight either around it or through it and navigate to a game 2 victory as well.
Yeah, we'll see. It's valuable. He is on the play. He's going to take out those like kind of expensive cards. It can be really tempting to bring in all that white removal. I mean, he'll have Will have no shortage of white answers. And as you said, best removal in those colors, all exile based as well, so we're not going to see anything go to the graveyard today. So if Will can find one of those early and stick it, he'll be happy. But Dillon is playing a little bit of hand disruption. So Dillon might be able to get in there a little bit early, take out that piece, or they might just opt to play through it, and I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't see too much in terms of life total pressure from Will in game one. So Dillon does definitely have angles where they can kind of wait until they've used a grief or a Thoughtseize or something to strip the key pieces of removal or hate from Will's hand before trying to reanimate a threat like Grizzlebrand or just throw a bunch of mana into a fourth Illingus or any other sort of really big, impactful CMC threat, unless Will can construct sort of a slightly more high pressure board state than he managed to in game one. The Giver of Runes is obviously very powerful in a lot of fair matchups, and the name escapes me, but the second creature, the 2 spells per turn, definitely
Archon,
the Archon,
yeah.
Definitely has pretty relevant text,
Definitely.
even potentially in this matchup. It just, by the time it came out, Grizzlebrand was already well and truly on the board.
Yeah,
So it's just a little bit too late to name much.
So I think this is going to be a keep from Dillon by the looks of it. I saw a White Plume Adventurer, we saw a Traxa, we saw the Ring, a few lands, Otawara being one of them. So it looks like he's opting to keep it. Will's going for that quick Urza's Saga, so no constructs will be made, but we'll find ourselves with a Graveyard Hate piece, perhaps, or even a Soul Ring very soon, and we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Urza's Saga, one of the many cards over the last few sets and years that has found its way into Highlander as being sort of a spell that occupies a land slot.
Yeah.
That just gives you a really flexible avenue of attack on your deck building, really.
Yeah, but it's also, as you said, it's in your land slot, so you actually, you're not casting any spells that can be countered, and you're not casting any spells that can be taken out of your hand. Like, this is 2 constructs and a tutor for free, essentially. Not for free, it's 1 point, and you do have to sacrifice it, but with a little bit of building around, Urza's Saga can be a really influential card to put on the battlefield early.
For sure, and we also see the Rest in Peace, and between Rest in Peace as well as a wide variety of Graveyard Hate that Saga could represent, there is quite a few barriers to any kind of unfair game plan that Dillon might have been hoping to deploy.
Yeah, and it depends. Will's going to have to hurry up a little bit if they want to put some pressure on while they have this advantage. Rest in Peace, of course, locking down the graveyard. We'll see what he gets with this Urza's Saga, but we saw from Dillon discarding Dance of the Dead for this Bitter Reunion, very similar to game one, but this time we will not be reanimating very quickly, even though Dillon, I believe, drew a reanimate off the Bitter Reunion. So unluckily, a little bit of a dead card in their hand, but they still have the White Plume Adventurer and they still have the Ring, so it's not like we're going to run out of things to do over the next couple of turns, but we'll see if it's enough to take on Will's mono white barrage.
Yeah, Will deciding here that Rest in Peace, it hasn't been answered yet, and so represents more than enough Graveyard Hate, doesn't opt for something like a Relic of Progenitus, instead opts to ramp their Saga up into a Soul Ring, so he's become mana positive, which is pretty nice.
Yep. And also getting the mana from tapping it before it goes away as well, so we have 1 mana in pool. Here comes perhaps a 4-drop, and by the looks
I believe that's another Archon of Emeria.
Yeah, so Archon of Emeria back from the dead. Possibly, I guess, leaving that Urza's Saga mana to dry, possibly just not having anything good to cast, but This is kind of fine. Dillon's gonna perhaps play the White Plume. I guess White Plume Adventurer is gonna lose value now that we have a Archon of Miria on the other side. But the One Ring will come down eventually, and it's gonna give Dillon a little bit of protection and a little bit of breathing space to either find an answer for this Rest in Peace or the show and tell that will stop it from being relevant.
Yeah, I mean, currently Dillon's life total is not under a huge amount of pressure. They're not necessarily obligated to find an answer for the Archon or the Rest in Peace right now, but sort of the more of these little incidental lock pieces that do chip away at Dillon's life total will can assemble, kind of the harder it gets. And obviously this Archon is going to make any sort of card filtering effect, whether that be your blue effects like your brainstorms or things like this bitter reunion, they become so much less impactful when you can't chain them into a second play.
Yeah, absolutely. And the pain doesn't stop because here comes Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, attacking him for 2 with the Archon of Miria. Now you can only cast 1 spell a turn, and if it's non-creature, it's going to cost you 1 more. And we were talking about the One Ring just before, but being a 4-mana non-creature spell, Dillon is not going to be able to cast it under this Thalia just yet.
Yeah, it's going to be a 5-mana investment rather than just a 4.
Yeah.
So that's a bit rough on Dillon's end, and they don't seem to have any current interaction. And that clock is kind of doubled now with Thalia herself also having 2 power, unless Dillon has something like a Fatal Push or an Orcish Bowmaster to take this Thalia out.
Yeah. This is super nice. So we are paying the extra for a 5-mana Court of Grace. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. And then if you can keep the Monarch around, which I think is what Will's going to intend to do, but if you can keep that card around, you're going to make a 4/4 Angel at the beginning of your upkeep. However, of course, if you cannot keep that Monarch around, it's just going to make a 1/1 Spirit. So we're attacking for a pretty big force here. This might be Will's game by the looks of it. Dillon's going to fetch out a non-basic land to presumably come into the battlefield tapped, Savaitrium being the option. But yeah, Will seems to be sort of pulling away from this match.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these Become the Monarch cards are really quite deceptively strong. For someone who's not familiar with the mechanic, it might seem as though you're sort of opening yourself up to a situation where your opponent is able to take that monarchy off you and sort of run away with the game. But in almost every situation, that's just not how the cards play. They just put you ahead and they keep you ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems that Dillon agrees with you because they are going to pack it up for game 2, and we're going to go straight into game 3 here very soon. The 1-2 punch of Rest in Peace plus a fast clock is exactly what Will needed. Just Rest in Peace by itself probably wasn't going to be enough, but the fact that it was followed up with 2 hate pieces means that Will was able to keep the pressure up while Dillon was looking for that next answer, and it was enough to take that game.
Yeah, I mean, Thalia buying an entire turn against the One Ring means that Dillon doesn't have that additional time to buy, and then with that Court coming in as well, the clock goes from being just 4 power to 8 power, and then even the Thalia, sorry, not the Thalia, the One Ring, giving you protection. I mean, it's just another turn for Will to make that Angel.
Yeah.
So it doesn't represent as much stemming of the bleeding as perhaps it might in some other board states.
Yeah, for sure. We'll go into the next game here. This is our titular game 3. We see in Dillon's hand actually 2. We see a Necromancy and we see a Dance Last Voyage of the X, a sticker Necromancy, and this is kind of awkward here because Dillon's got to decide whether or not, even on the play, if Unmarked Grave into Necromancy is going to be good enough, and it looks like they're going to go for it. So we'll see what comes out of it. But again, this hand, it looks pretty susceptible again to Graveyard Hate, and I think Dillon's probably going to hope that being on the play will be enough to stop that from being too much of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a limit to how much you can play around Graveyard Hate. particularly with things like aggressive mulliganing. Sort of if you put yourself that far behind on material before the game even starts, and then your opponent has the hate, even if you have the removal for it, you don't have the cards left to kind of deploy your in-game plan.
Yeah.
So I guess here Dillon's hoping that either whatever graveyard hate Will has is slow enough that the necromancy will come down fast enough, or is sufficiently kind of low impact in its nature that Dillon can just fight through it.
Yeah.
I guess really just hoping that Will doesn't untap and slam a Rest in Peace on turn 2 here.
Yeah, I think I saw a Sanctifier and Vec on Will's side, which will be partially annoying, but it depends on what Dillon puts into the graveyard, and if it was a Sanctifier and Vec in Will's hand. What Dillon really needs actually just right now is just a little bit of fast mana. Luckily, Ancient Tomb is one of them. Here's our first go. We're going to get the... we're going to leave it up to the gods now. So Unmarked Grave, 2 mana Entomb, but for non-legendary cards. So you can put Life from the Loam in there, you can put Unburial Rites there, and we'll see what Dillon goes for. Kind of unfortunate, we were talking about this before the match started because I was fiddling with the list, and at the last minute chose to take out Whirlgorger Dragon, which is a non-legendary spell that is a great combo with Necromancy, but a little bit short on cards, and still had the Abdel, and of course Whirlgorger can be awkward with the other reanimate spells in your hand, so you don't really want to be planning it in that way, but it looks like Dillon's going to go for the Titan of Industry, a new card from Streets of Capenna. On ETB, if we see it on ETB, it's going to produce Dillon an option of what they would like to choose out of 2. One of them is a shield counter, one of them is gain 5 life, one of them is make a 4/4 Rhino creature token, and the other one is naturalize. So there will be the opportunity for a naturalize, although I think Dillon is just trying to possibly put a bunch of power onto the battlefield. It is a 7/7 trample reach itself, so nothing to sneeze at for sure.
Yeah, 7/7 trample reach that comes with a lot of stock options. Definitely seems like something that Dillon would like to invest in the current board state.
Yeah.
Seems like we are seeing some sort of answer coming out from Will's side.
And it's Mana Tithe. So Mana Tithe enough to... really unlucky by Dillon's side. Dillon not playing around that Mana Tithe, always, never expect the Mana Tithe, but Dillon playing the extra mana for Aethersworn Canonist, not Aethersworn Canonist, the Esper Sentinel. And so Esper Sentinel says, I'm going to draw a card unless you pay 1 mana for your first non-creature spell. Dillon said, all right, that seems like a fair deal, I'll pay. And then Will said, haha, you fool, you fell right into my white force spike. So Mana Tithe asking Dillon for just a little bit more, and that was enough to stop that Titan of Industry from entering the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, pretty huge swing from that Mana Tithe. Has definitely now put Dillon in a rough situation unless they can find another reanimation effect. These incidental chips from Will's side, as well as Dillon's own Ancient Tomb, is starting to put some pretty reasonable pressure on the life total.
Big time.
But we do see Dillon seems to have another play lined up.
And that one is, we have a fun one today, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between. It is a Most Dangerous Gamer, also famous non-binary icon. It is a 4 mana 2/2 with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield, you open an attraction. When it attacks, you open an attraction. And whenever you open an attraction, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on the Most Dangerous Gamer. So 4 mana 2/2, pretty bad to start off with, but it will become a 3/3 after the ETB resolves. And then every time it attacks, it'll get slightly larger. So by the time it's attacking, it will attack as a 4/4 Death Touch and will open 2 attractions. Whether or not the attractions are good enough, that's a story for another time, but we're going to see really soon. Here comes our first visit to the Astrotorium. It is, I'm going to get in there real close, and I can tell you that I believe it is a Tunnel of Love. So we're going to go really quick run through with attractions. They begin as your main phase starts. you roll to visit. And if you get one of the 2 numbers that are listed on the side of the card or more, so in this case it's 2 or 6, so at the beginning of Dillon's main phase, they can roll a dice.
Right, because I have a terrible time with attractions.
That's hilarious. Yeah, we just got word that attractions are bad, and we're having a terrible time passing them, but that's okay. The rules are written on the back of the card, so the rules are available to all available players. In those beautiful clear sleeves. But yes, we're going to decide in as our main phase starts, if we roll a 2 or a 6, we get to visit the Tunnel of Love. And the Tunnel of Love says, choose a creature you control and a creature you don't control. You get to choose to have them go exile and come back. So a little bit of flicker action happening. Or if they come out of the Tunnel of Love and they do not enjoy each other's company, Dillon can choose to have them fight each other. Fight being a keyword where they attack each other out of combat and deal damage equal to their power to each creature. So if you go into the Tunnel of Love, you may go in. If you come out and you're not pals anymore, then fighting will be involved.
Seems as though Will has opted that one attraction is more than enough nonsense for this game state, and is going to path to exile this Most Dangerous Gamer, which has some pretty nice potential interactions with the tunnel all by itself.
Yeah.
If you flicker it, can make more attractions, or you can fight just about anything, and the Death Touch will let you finish it off.
Absolutely. So yeah, Will read the card, had someone come over and read the card, and then read the card again, and then said, you know what, I'm going to cast Path to Exile, and we're going to talk about this later. So Tunnel of Love will stay on the battlefield for the rest of the game. It is technically an artifact, so if Will has any shatter effects, he will be able to destroy it. But it's so funny because it was made for free and it may never trigger. So Will might have a Naturalize in his hand and he might just be like, whatever, we can Tunnel of Love. Tunnel of Love at the moment not providing any value at all, unfortunately, because you do have to choose a creature you control. And Dillon does not have that available to him. So we won't see any fighting at least next turn, but perhaps the turn after that, we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Without any targets on the side of the field for the tunnel, or any sort of body that can block, Dillon is finding their life total more and more pressured, and is in a pretty rough situation. There aren't really many more turns left for Dillon to find outs.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one, unfortunately, for Dillon from here on out. Esper Sentinel now getting +1/+1 trample and lifelink, which is a great combination of stuff for the Shadow Spear to give it. We'll see if maybe there's a little bit of removal here, maybe there's not. Dillon is tossing up whether or not they want to cast a spell with that Sapphire Triome. We'll see, but yeah, as you said before, there's not very many turns for Dillon to turn this around. We'll see what else Dillon has in store for us. Perhaps even soon. Will's done an interesting thing this game as well, where actually not very much has been happening on Will's side. Not very much pressure, not very much disruption, but unfortunately, because Dillon's at 8 life right now, are we visiting? We are not visiting. At 4 on the roll, we've decided to opt out of visiting the Tunnel of Love, and perhaps we'll view whatever attractions are around next time. But for now, Most Dangerous Gamer came onto the battlefield, ate a removal spell, and makes Dillon roll a dice for the rest of the game, which is the best it might be able to do for Dillon at this point.
I believe that even with no legal targets, Dillon still technically does have to roll that die.
Yeah, exactly.
Is very dedicated to their mission of not receiving any GRVs this tournament.
And we appreciate that, and we want to see it happen. Here comes another card. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, again another two-faced card that has been fantastically replaced with a one-sided hand-drawn token. But Fable of the Mirror Breaker, for everyone who knows, a 3-mana enchantment that will make a goblin on ETB. That goblin can attack and make a treasure. Chapter 2, we discard up to 2 cards and draw that many cards. Chapter 3, it flips into Kiki-Jiki, Reflections of Kiki-Jiki. Just a memory of the old Kiki-Jiki from original Kamigawa.
It was definitely the Kamigawa block.
Yes. One of them.
One of them, yep. Look, I would guess Betrayers, but I have no actual evidence or information to base that guess.
But that doesn't matter because all we know is that this is merely a reflection of the previous Kiki Jiki.
It's a story about how cool he was.
Exactly, and he did do a lot of things. He whined and he dined. Whether or not that's all that is needed, we'll find out because I believe, again, this is the Court of Grace coming in for its second appearance this match. It doesn't do anything at the moment. The Goblin will stem a little bit of the bleeding for Dillon because Esper Sentinel only a 2/2. And we'll see if Dillon opts to trade. Interesting timing on that one. I think we were deciding whether or not we were going to give a protection, but only after it blocked. So that Goblin is a 2/2 and it is red. So I believe we're giving it protection from red after blockers were declared. No intention of getting through, but Dillon is going to perhaps even respond by casting a removal spell, and that removal spell being again Leyline Binding. I don't think we can afford to pay the 2 mana to stop Esper Sentinel from drawing Will a card, but at the very least we are going to get rid of that Esper Sentinel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Dillon's pretty reliant on this Goblin at this point in the game to stick around. So couldn't really have that that occur.
Yeah. Still trying to decide exactly what's happening here, but yep, all right, so we're doing some stuff in response. Actually going for the Shadow Spear, which is kind of interesting because you did have the activation of the Giver of Runes on the stack, so you could have responded by casting a white spell targeting that Esper Sentinel, but elected to go with the Shadow Spear instead, possibly just guarantee that happening, but we're still in a pretty awkward place for Dillon, and hopefully there's something big coming out of Dillon's future in this next couple of turns. Hopefully we won't forget to, oh yeah, excellent. We may visit the Tunnel of Love yet again, or at least walk past and say, I don't have anyone who's looking to fall in love this game. But 2 triggers are going to go on the stack here, the Saga ticking up and the option to visit an attraction going up as well. So here comes the roll for Dillon to visit the attraction.
Personally, I would advocate against visiting any Tunnels of Love.
Oh yeah.
You can definitely find some stories online about the things people get up to in them that may change your opinion on those particular attractions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Dillon hopefully will stay wise and not go into that Tunnel of Love. Not having the option at the moment because there are no creatures on the battlefield to potentially enter the Tunnel of Love, but as you said, I don't think we really want to anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know at this point that there are very many draws left for Dillon to find that gets them out of this kind of state. They need to have a threat that really sticks to the board, and I mean, with this Giver of Runes in play, Will can potentially give something protection from one blocker and kind of sneak it through. And Dillon, thanks to this Ancient Tomb, is on a pretty unhealthy life total.
Yeah, it's kind of an awkward one. I was going to mention the power of Ancient Tomb because we are at 7 mana right now. We're like pretty close. If the draw was Archon of Cruelty land, that'd be great. You can cast it, hard cast it. I think what we saw was Waker of Waves, and the decision is whether or not we want to pay to get another copy of Waker of Waves or not. It can be really dangerous about what we're going to do next, but Dillon's going to go down to 4. If they tap the Ancient Tomb, that's going to put them down to 2, and we're getting pretty close to a lethal Esper Sentinel. Not lethal yet. I believe we actually have that 1/1 as well from the Court of Grace, so we can't tap that Ancient Tomb lest we be dying. I guess, yeah, it should be okay. We should be okay. We might be able to block 1. Depends on what Dillon's planning. So here comes something. It's a Yorion, and we're gonna put it onto the battlefield. This is kind of good actually. Yorion entering the hand and then providing a blocker by itself, but then also flickering the Kiki Jiki if Dillon so wants to, and maybe even the Leyline Binding if they choose to as well. But yeah, we're going to keep the Leyline Binding there, protect Dillon against that trampling threat with the Shadow Spear. But we are going to make a blocker with the Fable of the Mirror Breaker being flickered. No intention to flicker the Tunnel of Love, although maybe possible. Presumably.
It should be a possible target. I'm not exactly sure how attractions interact with that sort of exile effect. Things like tokens, once they go into exile, they kind of cease to exist.
Yes.
So they don't flicker back in. I'm not sure quite how that applies to attractions. If there's certainly a world going forward in which the Tunnel of Love now does have some amount of text.
Yes.
Yorion potentially being an enjoyer of that tunnel despite the sanitary risks within.
Of course, the giant Sky Noodle making its all the way through the Tunnel of Love, hopefully finding a partner, if not a fighter. But it is kind of cute having a flicker with the Yorion because that leads to more flickers, of course. It's not going to matter here. We see a hard cast Solitude taking a little bit of damage here from what I believe is an Ancient Tomb. But this will gain Dillon 3 life. It's not the end of the world, but again, Tunnel of Love running out of patrons for sure, with Dillon's side being pretty lackluster.
Yeah, it is still sitting on this Goblin token from that Fable of the Mirror Breaker that was flickered, I believe. But as we kind of just went over, tokens don't really work very well with that kind of flicker effect.
Yeah.
So doesn't have too much action going on there, unfortunately.
Yeah, so we're going to roll again to visit the Tunnel of Love. I'm going to decide whether or not it hits. If I'm not mistaken, it's a 4, which will not hit. If I'm pretty sure it's a 2 and a 6, and I'm pretty sure that's a 4, so obviously 720p, one of the lower Ps that is available, but still enough to understand that Waker of Waves happening at some point, maybe even between, we're doing it in between the triggers resolving. So Waker of Waves can cycle for 2 mana, put 1 card in your graveyard, put 1 card on in your hand. So kind of like a cantrip attached to a body, but doing that before the Fable of the Mirror Breaker trigger, second trigger resolves. So we can dig a little bit deeper. And yeah, we'll see what Dillon has next. But we're hoping for something powerful because Will is attracting quite the powerful board here of creatures.
Yeah, I mean there is certainly a sequence of draws in Dillon's deck that can get them out of this hole, and they are digging as hard as they can to get to it. But it is a pretty rough state to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a funny one here, if I'm not mistaken, I did see Dillon have a look at a double-faced card. I'm going to hope that that double-faced card is a Atali, because we are casting something for a lot of mana. It is Atali, and this was the card that Dillon was hoping for, a huge 7/7 that cascades for both players, and you get whatever non-land card from both decks on ETB. Here's the beautiful version of the front, and if we wheel into something powerful, we might actually be able to get back into this game.
Yeah, definitely a spicy one. Looks like we haven't necessarily got the highest CMC hits imaginable, but Dillon at the very least seems pretty happy with what has come off their own deck.
Yeah, so Atali coming in here. 2 Atali Primals, would you believe? But yeah, we're going to go for the other one, but that's okay. We get a Brotherhood's End that wiped the board, and a Archon of Emeria, and Dillon knows how to cast their cards, so we're going to Brotherhood's End and then cast the Archon of Emeria, so we're not going to both stop the Brotherhood's End from happening or killing the Archon of Emeria. So that was a good Atali hit. And
yeah, I mean the Archon is sort of a little bit of extra gravy on top, but that Brotherhood's End has really warped the game state that we found ourselves in.
Yeah.
I mean, Dillon is still potentially looking at maybe some sort of cheeky haste artifact or something like that, with a fairly low life total, is not entirely out of the woods yet, but is definitely not nearly as on the back foot as they once were.
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw the Angel coming in. Dillon takes a little bit of damage, but not enough to kill. But we are sacrificing the Archon of Emeria and to protect Dillon's life total from that lethal Angel. A great choice. It is funny, Atali has I think it's 10 mana to flip. It's 9 in a Phyrexian, so we might not even pay the Phyrexian, but we have a lot of mana. We might see the very first flipped Atali, and it flips into a Blightsteel Colossus, which is quite a powerful finisher for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly it's a hefty mana investment, but sometimes you have a lot of mana available to you. And it looks like this is the line that Dillon is going for.
Holy!
And we have a reader, as Will does not seem to have anticipated this particular line.
Here it comes, and yes, we saw the flip, transform Atali, it becomes a Blightsteel Colossus, and then Dillon says, hey, do you mind if I swing in for lethal here? Will has nothing on the battlefield, nothing to prepare for this onslaught of the Atali, and boy oh boy, we just saw an Atali flipped and win the game. And that took out the match, incredible. Congratulations, Dillon, on that 2-1 win, fighting and clawing. Getting that Atali hit was huge, and it did end up turning the game around.
Yeah, Atali has definitely demonstrated that dinosaurs are better than Archons and humans.
Yeah, absolutely. As usual, dinosaurs take the coolest creature award. The Tunnel of Love, proving its worth that game by making us explain it more than once and having to roll for it multiple times. But I am glad to see the attractions on the battlefield. Dillon progresses through this round without a GRV. I'm going to check with them later to see if they've received any other GRVs this game, but if they have not, Dillon will win a special prize, and that prize being a pin-on animal that I found at a thrift store.
Do you want me to scrap looking for cards because it takes up the whole screen?
Yeah. No, if you can avoid it, but if it was only taking up, it's still only taking up this bit, right?
Oh, can you not see?
Oh, no, you do, it's okay. That you changing and stuff, that's fine. We can talk through that very easily.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good. So thank you to our YouTube enjoyers. That will be the end of this video. Please stay tuned for round 4. For our Twitch enjoyers, please hang around. We have exactly 1 minute and 7 seconds. We are coming to time every single round, but it doesn't matter because we have a minute or 2 to spare each time. So we're going to go and be right back very soon, and then we will BRB. But congratulations, Dillon, for taking out that game. Commiserations for Will for not, and boy oh boy, am I happy to see that Atali flipped. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll be right back.